This is the Rita Cosby Show.
In just the last few hours, the Senate Republican primary has basically been resolved in Pennsylvania because candidate David McCormick conceded to Dr. Mehmet Oz in the very closely deadlocked race, which had gone to a state-mandated recount. There were less than 1,000 votes dividing the pair. Oz, of course, was backed by former President Donald Trump, and now he will square off against Democrat John Fetterman in the November 9th midterm election to replace retiring Republican Senator Pat Toomey. Again, also McCormick called and conceded, made the call to Mehmet Oz, and this is indeed a very, very critical race for Republicans hoping to regain control of the Senate. So big news for Dr. Mehmet Oz, who will now square off against the Democrat in November. Meantime, speaking of President Trump, well, his former trade manager, Peter Navarro, was treated like he had robbed 5,000 banks today. It was shocking. And I want to get your thoughts tonight as to the disparity in treatment from the folks who have not been wanting to comply with the January 6th committee. Needless to say, it's extremely politically charged. The Republicans that are on there are all anti-Trumpers. They're not the ones that the Republicans in the Senate wanted. Kevin McCarthy had said, look, I'd like this person on the committee. I'd like this person on the committee. And guess what? They're not on the January 6th committee. But today, Peter Navarro is at an airport and he gets basically averted from being on the plane. They put him in handcuffs, they put him in leg shackles, and they arrest him. And to me, just the disparity in the way that they have treated folks tied to President Trump is outrageous. I want to hear your thoughts. If you agree with me that it is so over the top that now anybody tied to President Trump and this January 6th committee, they are treating like they're terrorists. I mean, they are treating them worse than the guys who are on the terrorist watch list, basically, that have crossed the border. I mean, they are like so determined to go after anybody tied to President Trump. And to me, it's really over the top and it's so politically charged. It looks so obvious. And it comes, of course, at the same time that we barely see anything happening to anybody tied to the, quote, summer of love. Remember all the protests that were taking place all over America where billions of dollars of damage occurred, where people died, where law enforcement were seriously injured, where a lot of people still haven't been able to even go back to their businesses yet? You know, we haven't really seen too much coming from that. And in fact, we've seen quite the opposite. We've seen Democrats really going after and supporting bailing out those people. Remember, we saw President Joe Biden's campaign team was out there and they were actually helping with the Minnesota Freedom Fund that was bailing out the protesters that were, burning up the police station and everything else. And then we also, of course, saw Kamala Harris, who was saying, those people are out there protesting and they should continue protesting. That was the same message that we heard from Nancy Pelosi. And they were condoning that. They were supporting that. And we haven't really seen any really severe repercussions tied to that. Very few. But gosh, if you had anything to do with President Trump or January 6th, you are like a monster. You're like a terrorist. You're like a serial killer. I mean, how crazy is this? Because Peter Navarro, as he explained today, and he's not going down quietly, which is why I think they wanted to make an example of him. But Peter Navarro, here he is, the trade advisor, basically, for President Trump. And he has said that he's supportive of the president, but he feels that this is a huge political vendetta, as I think it is too. It's outrageous. And when you sit and you look at all the steps, and what they're asking him is to come and testify, to also give some documentation, some paperwork. These are white collar issues. These are right now are basically saying hand over documents. He even was talking, he said, with an FBI agent on Wednesday and said, you know what? If you need anything, let me know. I'm going to try to, I don't agree with this, but I'm going to go through the courts. I want to fight this tooth and nail, but I'm going to go through the courts. It wasn't like he was MIA. He said he just talked to somebody earlier this week. And then it's almost like 24 hours later, they literally pull him, he's right there at the airport. By the way, he lives right near FBI headquarters. So they could have even just gone to his house. They know where he lives. But instead, they created this huge scene. They basically cuff him. They put the leg shackles on him. And he's treated like worse than anybody I've ever seen, tied to the Summer of Love, those protesters. I'm being facetious calling it the Summer of Love because it was the summer of hell. It was horrible. There was so much destruction and so much burning, and yet they're not going after those people. They're not saying, God, how terrible these people were. That's horrible what they did, blah, blah, blah. You're not even hearing any of that. All you are hearing is let's go after anybody tied to Trump, 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 Trump. I mean, to me, this is so outrageous and so over the top. It reminded me a lot of the whole thing with Roger Stone. Remember they went to the house with the armed guards and the SWAT team and all this other stuff. Again, if you look at what they're going after them for, it's not complying with the subpoena. This is not armed robbery. They're treating repeat offenders that have used guns and a whole bunch of other things in New York City a lot better than they're treating Peter Navarro. I mean, that is outrageous. Outrageous. Take a listen. Here is Peter Navarro describing today after he got processed and booked and all that other stuff. Here he is describing what happened to him. Take a listen.
And instead of coming to my door where I live, which, by the way, is right next to the FBI, instead of calling me and say, hey, we need you down at court, we've got a warrant for you, I would have gladly come. What did they do? They intercepted me getting on the plane. And then they put me in handcuffs. They bring me here. They put me in leg irons. They stick me in a cell. By the way, just historical note, I was in John Hinckley's cell. They seem to think that that was an important historical note. Okay? That's punitive. That what they did to me today violated the Constitution.
How outrageous is that for somebody who is not complying with an obviously politically charged committee? I mean, this is it's just stunning to me, just the disparity. And guess what? The dog and pony show is only just beginning because they're going to be doing some primetime hearings coming up this week. And you know what that means? There's going to be a whole bunch more of this to come. But they are clearly trying to send a message to Peter Navarro because he's close to President Trump. And again, why didn't they say, hey, you know what? We don't agree with you not complying. Let's talk this over. Let's try to figure this out. Or if you want to surrender, you can come in. We can process you because we have to do it or whatever the case is, as opposed to showing up with guns drawn, shackles and cuffs. I would love to see a repeat offender who looted and beat a cop over the head in summer of 2020, basically treated that way. That would really be nice because that is what they deserve much more than this political issue. Here's a little bit more because Peter Navarro says he knows what this is all about. He says this is clearly all about the Democrats trying to do whatever they can before the midterms to put a dent on President Trump.
Their mission, their clear mission is to prevent Donald John Trump from running for president in 2024 and being elected for president. And people like me are in their way, and they're not coming for me and Trump, they're coming for you.